Yeah, yeah. Okay, people are coming in, but nevertheless, we are filming that, and it's much more important that we have later options to just review the conversations and view them on YouTube, etc. Glenn, are you? Do you want me to pick you a chair?
No, I'm fine.
You're fine standing up. Okay, okay, right. So, but you will need a microphone. So yeah, you will need one. I can leave two to gentlemen. I can pick one additional one. No, don't worry. Oh, this is a nice one. It says number 4. Are you comfortable with that number?
Yeah, right. That's a good number, number 4.
Okay. No, it will turn on itself. People from up can turn it on.
Okay, we're on.
Yeah. Okay. This is the magic. Right. So when I spoke with the organizers and when I spoke with you this very morning, we actually saw that there will be plenty of presentations regarding nitty-gritties of the GDPR and processes and stuff like this. But we actually wanted to zoom out a little bit and have a view on the implications the GDPR is bringing to EU, is bringing to the foreign companies servicing EU, is bringing on how Europe maybe is trying to, grab some things, at least if it doesn't have its own, YouTubes and Googles, etc. At least it sets us up a set of rules of how do you service European customers, etc., etc. And Glenn had a nice one this very morning, and I would like you to actually kick off with the first question or rounded question. And I would like very much the gentlemen, when they answer the question, they introduce themselves briefly, because some of our viewers were not able to view previous sessions, so we have to reintroduce ourselves. Thank you very much. Glenn?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about all this. Europe is just one part of the world, and we've just brought in a whole new system that is different from everybody else. And my big question is, I'm a bit of a cynic. Is this actually going to work? Is the big question. And if it is going to work, what is the benefit? And if it isn't going to work, why isn't it going to work?
Okay, let's start with the first chair.
Hi, I'm Adrian Winkles. I'm a cyber lead for Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge. I think GDPR is probably a first step for the rest of the world, if I'm perfectly honest. Whether it be America or South America or wherever, other people will probably look for Europe to lead, and we are taking a brave step in the right direction, I believe.
Okay, it's a first step. This is what I have.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that. First step.
Moritz?
Yeah, Moritz Karg. I'm working at the moment as a project manager for the local government in Schleswig-Holstein. I was for 11 years legal advisor at the data protection authorities in Schleswig-Holstein and in Hamburg, and my main job was regulating companies in the e-privacy sector, and in the last 5 years I mainly was concerned with Google and Facebook. Concerning your question, well, I don't quite know. I don't have the glass ball, but I think it's the main impact will be, from the legal point of view, a norm-setting impact. And maybe the picture is too big, but maybe it is something like the French Revolution, which exported certain values from the European continent in the rest of the world, and we have a similar movement now. And if you look at Jan Philipp Albrecht and his movie, in which he said, Well, I want that the idea of data protection is a value which will really carry out in the world. It's a human right, and it's a universal human right. And if you think of how much impact data processing has already today on our everyday life, if I think about defenses and defense issues, purposes like predictive policing, things like this, then I think it is worth to think about this kind of value and this impact data protection will have on the world. And I think today, we start today here on this way.
Good one. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Chris Kombermal. I'm the chair of FEDMA, a collection of 21 DMAs from around Europe, and also CEO of the UK DMA. I think there are two contradictory answers to the question, Glenn, from my point of view. I certainly have many people tell me that the European legislation is going to make Europe non-competitive with the rest of the world. And not so much in terms of America and the companies coming out of Silicon Valley, but very much in the context of China and a completely different environment that's happening there, a different set of companies that are developing very, very, very quickly. So I think that's one. At the same time, I also think there is a need to have a balanced legislative approach, and many countries are looking to GDPR as establishing a balanced, risk-based piece of legislation. And to be honest, I think in the end, the final version of GDPR was much better balanced in terms of taking a risk-based approach. What is more problematic, I think, at the moment coming forward is the e-privacy legislation that's being worked on in Europe, which poses a greater threat to Europe's competitiveness and economic development than GDPR does.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Duncan Smith. I'm a director of a company called iComply. We're a compliance consultancy, and we work very much in the marketing sector and the use of data for sales and marketing. I think one of the things we should recognize, of course, is that GDPR is not the only legislation out there that's relating to privacy. So one of the things that we find with multinational clients when we're working with their sales and marketing teams is we often have a clash mid-Pacific, mid-Atlantic with the Australian privacy principles, for example. So, there are other countries out. The Japanese privacy legislation, for example, is very well established, as is the Australian privacy legislation. So I think what we're seeing is that there are a number of nations around the world that are starting to coalesce around some of these core fundamental human rights, which is a very good thing. But what we do have to recognize is that when we try and implement this legislation, we really do have to think about how you implement it on the ground. If it's going to work, we have to think what really happens in companies. And if you have a US parent company, for example, with a European-wide distribution network or European-wide sales and marketing team, it's incredibly difficult to try and understand, is GDPR the law that we apply? Is the federal... Yeah, if I'm a US company and I have a US trade market and a LATAM market and an Asia-Pac market, we have to start thinking a bit beyond Europe and start thinking how the world puts privacy in place. And I think what we might then see is that we'll see a coalescence of some of this legislation, and then we will see the really great stuff in GDPR because it will marry up against the things we have in the Japanese or the Australian privacy law. And then some of those other countries that don't have the consent-based legislation, I think they will start to pick up some of the better pieces that we have in GDPR. And certainly that's what we're seeing with our North American clients now, is that they're starting to say, yeah, we like that piece and we like that piece. Maybe we'll start putting those into our North American market. So I think that's a very good thing for GDPR. So I think that's why we will start seeing more organizations picking up on this legislation, even if they're not forced to do so by the global scope of GDPR.
So in terms of Glenn's question, you think it was inevitable and it will succeed in terms of being the first step for worldwide
I think that really maybe
additional legislations?
Yeah, maybe it's not the first step. Perhaps around the world we're all taking some similar, or certain countries are taking similar steps, and that's why I think maybe we're starting to come to a point where we recognize that actually we have let the genie out the bottle with regards to protecting people's data and giving transparency, and as a consequence of which there may now be more force behind that sort of tsunami. We might get a little bit more power behind it as the nations that have got stronger privacy legislation start to coalesce together. And then I think we might start to pick up other organizations, or sorry, other countries that perhaps have more opt-out legislation, for example, United States.
Okay. Hani?
Hi everyone, it's Hani Choueri. I'm working consulting at Aon in the UK in insurance. Previous to that, had a number of chief data officer roles at an American organization, State Street. Before that at the Bank of England in London as a chief data officer, and before that at HSBC. So I've seen sort of a huge variety of organizations, which is quite interesting. In terms of optimism, I think it's going to work. It's working. We've seen, you can only tell by the emails we've been receiving the last couple of days. We're seeing data subject access requests hit firms already today. I can tell you that. What's quite interesting, though, Duncan touched upon that, is we didn't talk about extraterritoriality too much today. It's quite complex, regarding what is in scope, what's not in scope. People think I'm a EU resident, I'm in the US. You're not protected if you're in the US, but it's about targeting goods and services, and it's about tracking, what have you. So I think it's going to take a long time for the US to adopt, because it's so fragmented. I'm reading US privacy law at the moment, and it beggars belief just how fragmented it is. They say there is protection, but it's by industry, it's by health, it's by financial sector. And it makes it very difficult to know what it is you're going to do. Some have 2-week timelines, some 5 weeks, some 8 weeks. It's just a mess, frankly, from a personal data perspective. Mm-hmm. So that's as harmonized. Now, I think what's going to happen is the big firms are going to find it a lot easier to do business globally if they adopt a more gold standard. They won't have to adopt everything in GDPR, but I think a lot of things make sense globally. So many firms are saying, right, we've got GDPR, we've got Australian, we've got US, etc. Here's everything we need to do. What makes sense and is easier, actually, to just implement? So, some things are crystal clear. Some things with data subject access request, you could say, well, I can easily differentiate because this person is in the US buying a US service, so he's not going to get that right. He or she won't get that right. But certain other things, PIAs, for example, well, we may as well do them. It's best practice anyways, because we build better systems, because we never know. We may end up marketing and having European data within the system. So some things it makes sense, and I think firms will drive that, but I doubt if the US will be able to change the legislation to have privacy as a horizontal. Mm-hmm. Asia, I think, and Middle East and other countries, definitely I think they'll start to adopt GDPR. It's a genius regulation, as I said earlier. It's done so much good things for firms, clean up hygiene, from the contracts to the technology, to compliance, to audit, everything. It's improved a lot within the firm that we don't think, we weren't expecting, right?
Okay, so you're saying the businesses will pick up only the best part of the GDPR, so some part of it will survive and will evolve, and some part will inevitably die.
I don't think it'll die, but I think it'll take a longer time to adopt many parts. I think local firms, let's say US firms working in US data subjects, I think it's going to take quite a long time for them to adopt anything. Global firms, I think, will have to adopt to stay competitive and make their business easier, mm-hmm. and less risk exposure, because you never know when you may end up processing EU data, so to mm-hmm. speak. So I think it's going to have a different timeline. I see, say, Asia adopting, definitely Europe. It's here to stay. There's no question about it.
Okay, good one, Alexander.
My name is Alexander Zimets. I'm a data protection officer in Latvia. I'm working with pharmacies, medicine, and anti-money laundering systems. What can I say? If we are looking historically, then competition law, anti-money laundering law, they all asked 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, not in Western Europe, but in Central Europe, wherever, that will it work or not? If you're looking now, we have very good court precedents and other stuff that we can use to implement. The same with GDPR. All the people now are afraid. They're afraid because the main reason is lack of knowledge. And what I'm offering always, you have 3 pillars, like learning, documentation, like accountability principle of accountability, responsibility principle, and also data subject information. If you know these three pillars, you have it at your system, then it's okay. And I think it's great. This is great tool for Europe to make it more competitive. That's it. It's very simple.
I could say you would say that, wouldn't you? Because you're in the trade. But I mean, I'm not sure that if you were in a business with 6 staff or 8 staff that you would say the same. I mean, the anti-money laundering thing is already a burden on small businesses because we keep getting pestered with things from the bank asking us to fill them in. And as I work and live in more than one country, I get more than one bank's worth of pestering. And it takes a lot of time. You know, it's 2 hours here, 3 hours there. And, you know, what are we going to add now with this in terms of time? I don't know. But I'm sure that we will be. I'm sure there are going to be compliance paperwork that starts creeping in from people like yourself and from other organizations that take time.
I just want to wish you to find a good consultant, that's it. With fantasy.
Yeah, but then that's money, and that's more resources. And if you're a small business,
yeah,
resources take, you know, it's time or money. It's one or the two.
You bet, yeah.
And Latvia, as you know, I mean, you know, just sliding away from it, but staying on the same sort of subject, which is regulation, that kill our time. I mean, I estimate that I need 3 weeks of the year just for tax. That's a long time. And this has been a good year this year. It's been slightly less. It's only been 3 weeks.
But you have choice.
No, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. That's a silly thing to say. I'm sorry. You don't have a choice. We don't have a choice with this. The fact is it's come. I wasn't consulted whether this is a good idea, whether I think it's a good idea and what data I want to keep. It's been imposed. And it's been imposed. And it's all right if you're the girl from Microsoft, and I listened to her very nicely today, talking about all the wonderful things, but how many lawyers has Microsoft got? Lots. Okay, it's all right for them, they can do it. But if you're a company, even especially an international company that deals with other countries and everything else, you've got troubles if you're small with things like this because it eats time. Sir.
I doubt this, and I'm sorry to say, it's silly, it costs you time. I do the job myself. You know, I have 800 schools now. I have 280,000 pupils, plus their parents, and I have to work for 34,000 teachers. What I do is standardization, which means I use quality management mechanisms, which you should do in your company as well. You do, exactly. We will look at the processes we are running into, for instance, schools. I do it, by the way, I do the same. I'm also a data protection officer for my sailing club, just for my sailing association. So what I do is I standardize, and it takes time and money, you're right, but in the end, I use the quality bit of it to know what I'm doing with my data. And if you, as you say, data is one of your assets of your company, you take care of this kind of asset. I mean, from my point of view, if I know what I do with my asset, I also do a value, I add value on this asset. And if you see it from now it's the marketing bit, trying to convince you that it's good for your company. On the other hand side, and that's what I said with the introductory answer, look from the point of the data of the people you process. And think and maybe widen your view, not only on your company, and I give you a solution later on for this very special problem, but widen your view and look at countries, for instance, like China. The GDPR also sets standards, or sets standard not only on private, but also on public entities. And if you widen your view on this issue, and you see what happens in China, you see what happens probably in Russia, so even in the United States, then we have to ask ourselves, do we really want to go on this path? Do I really want a system in which each time I step on the street, a camera focuses on me and decides, is this guy a good guy or is it a bad guy? And each time I go to the doctor, all the information goes not only to the doctor himself, but also to the governmental agencies. And if you see this global view, and if you see your company as part of this society, then maybe your view at the moment, I know it was a provocation, but still, maybe you'd shift your view and think of, if I take care of the data of my asset and I take care of the people or the data subjects, the data I process, then maybe it's for the common good and in the end also for my company. And now the easy solution, and we had this in the morning discussion, and I think he is still here. He said, the problem is that the associations of the companies did not do their job in the last 2 years. I expected associations to look especially on the small and medium companies who do not have 20 lawyers doing the job for them. They should have provided information guidance. And that's something I agree politics should have looked at and give guidance to companies like yours.
Yeah, but that is after the law is being in place. I mean, many companies in Latvia actually, and associations as well, cried to the moon that when are we going to have our local differences, exceptions, etc., so we can better prepare. And associations come from wide range of businesses. It's not only IT or production, etc. It is connected to the healthcare, to the forestry and other valuable resources.
Yeah, I just have to pick that up as I run a data and marketing trade association, and we've published quite a lot of guidance. But we ended up developing our guidance on our own with other associations like ISBA and the Data Protection Network. But we did in the end manage to have our guidance reviewed by the Information Commissioner's Office, so it went to market with some credibility. But the issue isn't so much our guidance. The issue in implementation is the wide range of different opinions that different lawyers are giving companies. So because we collaborated, we have an approach that we think is right for the marketing sector. And there is a role in GDPR for associations in all sectors to help understand how the interpretation should be for its sector. But at the same time, if every lawyer you speak to is giving a company a different solution and taking a risk-free approach as opposed to a customer-centric approach. So I spoke this morning on the importance of using GDPR as an opportunity to be customer-centric. But if I look at all the emails I've got in the last 2 weeks, it's being treated as a compliance process, not a customer-centric process. And I think that's potentially a danger for the success of the legislation. And I think Glenn's points about small businesses finding a burden are certainly true. But I think there had to be some standards established, and there is a balance in GDPR that if it's implemented correctly, becomes a risk-based approach where you can consider the customer's right to privacy and the legitimate interest of business in a balance with each other, which is why we think it's a dreadful mistake for the e-privacy legislation not to contain the 5 other bases of data processing that are in GDPR. We think, generally speaking, GDPR made a good balance, but when you move forward with additional legislation that doesn't recognize the legitimate interest of business or doesn't recognize data processing for the fulfillment of contracts and other things, then you create a different standard, which will be even more confusing for companies in the future. So we'd like to see the EU settle in and let's see how GDPR goes before we start developing whole new additional legislative standards.
Yeah, and that, I believe that brings us again to the timing. Now, I think almost everybody in this room actually agrees that GDPR had to be done. it is the correct thing to be done. I haven't heard in none of today's presentations the slightest doubt that, you know, maybe we didn't have to do it. I mean, so the GDPR is in, and in general, it may not be as bad, except there are, you know, exceptions, fines, and everything. And you made a good point. Does it make a race for compliance more important, like this badge, we are GDPR compliant, than user-centric service, trust-based service, where you can sell, you know, more services simply because of a good relationship with the customer and trust. Glenn, I think the gentlemen have actually been very politically correct when they answered your question, because on one hand, there is no clear answer. On the other hand, well, European Union has been actually very mastery at political correctness. If we remember last, all the regulations and everything, they come slowly in small packs as you treat the problem with white gloves and everything. And then comes the GDPR, which is not a small step, which is huge leap. I mean, just covering anything with the gazillion in fines. Now, would you believe somebody actually in European Union at that moment understood that this has to be done in such a huge leap, in such a harsh way, that it cannot be done in any other way?
Maybe it's not, maybe it looks like it's coming out that way, but of course it'll be the implementation of the legislation. So again, just one of the things that we see, and again from the small companies and the guidance from the lead bodies and the trade bodies, is actually we're going to be looking to case law, we'll be looking to precedent, we'll be looking to see who gets fined. It was always a joke on the training courses to see, well, you know, who's going to be the first one to go. But what was heartening was that some of the smaller companies we work with, and Chris and I were talking about this earlier, was that there was some stonking, pragmatic, risk-taking management was going on, where some companies just flat out refused to do what I was going to tell them to do, because they rightfully took a view of the risk. And I know maybe this is not politically correct, and maybe we should, no, I'm going to say it anyway. So, you know, the kettle in our office is not electrically tested. You know, because I'm not going to test my kettle in my office to make sure it's electrically meets European safety standards. There's 3 of us in the office and we make tea. And there are some small companies who, quite frankly, are going to take the same view of that data, but they take it responsibly. So they don't just turn around and go, I'm a small company, I can't be bothered with that. What they say is, they say, I'm a small company, and when you talk to me about risk, harm, damage, and distress, I have a list of 300 architects who I sell this flooring to. I'm not going to do reconsenting exercises with those architects. They buy my product, they like me, I've known them for 30 years. And I think what's quite interesting is some organizations have the strength of management to recognize that GDPR is about protecting people from harm, and not every non-compliance in GDPR creates harm, damage, or distress. And I think that's actually quite important to recognize, that there's enough skill, knowledge in the organization to think about big companies, the Facebooks of this world. We know GDPR was written for the large social media platforms. We know those. We know all the things about looking at people in the street and having facial recognition software. Absolutely, those are the core principles of GDPR that we absolutely have to have. But the small company selling flooring has got caught up in this, and I think we need to cut them some slack.
Yeah, I think, yes. So, I mean, one thing, you know, in thinking about this, first of all, I think we talked about this myth of this competitive advantage. I threw that away now. I think it's not a competitive advantage. You just got to do it and do it well, and that's it. You know, forget about competitive advantage. Nobody's going to buy your product because, oh, they're slightly more GDPR compliant than somebody else. You know, hardly have time to, you know, I was buying something, and even myself at my age, running out of patience, you know, like my kids, 15 seconds and I'm switched off, right? That's how fast it's moving. I think I kind of almost gone back to blame the regulators a little bit for taking such a long time to bring the law, because technology moves so fast. You know, a small firm can implement a very complex solution on the cloud in virtually no time, taking data, collecting data, pushing it, pulling it, you know, doing marketing. you know, and I think that's sort of progressed so rapidly that now this law is coming out so many years later, and bang, everybody's feeling feeling it. I think had it come in a couple of years before that, I think it would have preempted that, slowed some things down, get people to think before they implement and do the right things, right?
Okay, Alexander?
About small enterprises and competitiveness. If you have business which is not based on data, it's like any commodities or whatever, you name it, any. When under risk-based approach, you can do less things than other company like Facebook or any other huge companies, international companies, which main business for them is data. They have just data, and they grown just for 8 or 10 years as the biggest companies in the world. And they replaced the chemical companies and these oil companies, yeah, so fast. So it depends, and it's all about risk-based approach and knowledge. If you're a small company, and as colleagues said, that you know your customers for 30 years and no problems will be raised in future, then just keep working and don't think that you have to comply with every word, every letter in this regular. We have more than 12 tests and assessments in this regulation. I just found 2 today, more. Yeah, but still, if you don't work outside European Union, you now don't have 2 tests. If you don't have risky, high-risk processings, you then have 2 more tests. Then it's all about approach, and it calls risk-based approach. No risks or low risks, then it's okay. Forget. Just keep working, because if data is not the subject of your main agreements, then okay, just leave it. Keep doing things, and that's it.
I like that. It's interesting that none of the speakers today, apart from, I'm going to say you at the end, have actually come up with that view. Most of them were following as the line, you know, the compliance line, although we did have 1 or 2 touching on the possibilities. Could I jump on this, on the possibilities line? Because several people said, you know, this is going to bring in new possibilities. What business opportunities do you see this bringing in that weren't there on the 24th? From now on, what business opportunities, what new businesses are we going to see coming out of this new stuff?
Definitely data businesses, lots in data management, data governance. I think people will realize, you know, with all the data flows and mappings and what have, so the essential data management, I think, is going to take a step forward. Definitely will be a lot more on that. I think from a legal perspective, I think that's going to die down. The people are going to have case law to follow. I don't see many new business opportunities there. But definitely, I think data management is the biggest winner here.
Okay, data management.
Data management, I'm starting tendering processes now for secure messaging systems. I'm starting now with tendering process for school management software, pupils. We start now thinking of business solutions, communication solutions, GDPR compliant. Basically, we want to be able to introduce solutions, IT solutions, which allow us to take our data, transfer it, take Article 21, data portability. All companies, all solution designers who are able to show us to take to create systems where I'm allowed to take my data I have here and maybe I swap to another system because I realize that the old system doesn't work, or they start to be incompliant with certain legal regulations. So I can, for instance, leave my WhatsApp account and use a different messenger because I decided, well, they maybe they changed their policy. The company changes their policy. We have, I think, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia are the companies who have problems at the moment leaving Microsoft, because Microsoft just tells them, I changed my regulations, I changed the way of paying for my service. License agreement will be changing, and these Baltic states can't simply just say, well, then I take another system. But with the data portability aspects, for instance, companies will offer, or the companies who offer, and that's data management possibilities to transfer data, probably they will be better off than a company trying basically to create lock-in effects. I know that from the business point of view, it's always good to have a lock-in effect for your own company, but from the other side, from the consumer side, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're not going to agree on everything, Moritz, but
Excellent.
data portability is one of, I think, the most unfortunate aspects of GDPR. And I think if I look at it from, and I'm not going to comment on the tech company business model, but if I look at it from a consumer goods business model, a retail business model, somebody may be Tesco, a retailer, or an airline with an Air Miles program, and I've invested as a company over many years time and effort to get to know you better. And I've made suggestions in that time, and you've made purchases because of it. So your purchase history becomes a collaboration between me as a business trying to offer you goods and services that are useful to you, and you as the customer who sometimes likes my suggestions and makes a purchase, and other times doesn't. So having invested heavily in my relationship with you over many years, why should the benefit of that suddenly be given to Sainsbury's, who has been anyway trying to entice you publicly with many offers to lure you into their business, and has not succeeded in doing that, and has not made that effort over time to get to know you?
But if I decide not to do business with you anymore because, for instance, your suggestions just didn't meet my demands, where's the point of still sticking with you? I mean, you know, you see it always from the company point of view. Yeah, I know, you invest in me, you invest in my data. But on the other hand side, there is also the consumer who decided suddenly, for instance, Facebook. Look at Facebook. They decided to sell my data to Cambridge Analytica, or they didn't take care of that this flow of data doesn't happen. You know, they just didn't care. So where's the point from my side as a consumer to stick with this company? Not being able, it puts pressure on you, for sure. It puts pressure on you, but maybe it's a positive pressure. And thinking of how do I take care of my customer and trying to persuade him that sticking with me is the best choice ever you ever did.
Yeah.
So I'll just come back to that, and then I'll let you have a go, Duncan. Being forced to share everything you know about a customer with another company has nothing to do with the customer's ability to leave that business. You can move from Tesco to buy from Sainsbury anytime you want, and there's nothing stopping you from do that. The issue is, should the company that you've left share its knowledge of you with the new company that you're going to? You equally could keep a record of your own purchases with a company and provide that to the new company yourself. So I don't see any connection between data portability and your ability to choose a different company for a product or service. I think that's a false connection completely.
I just wonder if a simple solution to this might be to just give the data controller a choice, port or delete. If it's about protecting the data subject in terms of that data, to protect the commercial confidentiality of the business, as Chris was saying, could you just say, you can have the data, but if I don't want to give it, I'll
But okay, I'm going to take you one stage further on that.
it's a video, and you're on it, and I'm on it, and he's on it, and he's on it, and you say delete. I don't want it deleted, mate. So are we going to paste you out?
Well, actually, that's one of those, to answer the question about who wins out of GDPR, that's one of the technologies that definitely does win out of GDPR, is video masking technology, because that is one of the problems that we do have. But I think there's, again, this is something that's going to solidify over time, which is as we start to understand portability and core human rights. And I think we will start to understand more then when the consumer feels aggrieved because I haven't been allowed to port my data, and also where the company feels aggrieved because they put a lot of time and effort into them.
But there's a lot... Yeah, couldn't you...
I think we just have to be careful about portability, because I think sometimes it's been interpreted as everything that I've ever done with you. There's limitations in terms of the portability being what data I've given you, right, as opposed to all my transactions. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's limitations there. So it's like the right to be forgotten. People think, right, you're going to delete everything. No, of course I'm not. Because I've got legal obligations not to, right? So the same thing with portability. There's kind of limitations that are nuanced.
There's another aspect to this, which, I mean, apart from now we've airbrushed you out of the video, is nobody defined data this morning. So we started off with data. We just said data, data, data. And it's fine if we talk about data, which is, you know, name, rank, and number. 2496195 Corporal Smith, sir. That's fine. We all understand that. But when we're talking about more ethereal data, like what time does someone go online and what time does someone come offline, now those things are actually, in terms of, you know, artificial intelligence and the future, those things are quite important, because that's how you know to target him for fishing between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, when most fishermen come back and they go online when they get home. They do, don't they? They go fishing, they fish all, and then they go online when they come home for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So your advertising for fishing is going to be that time. Now, that sort of data, how does this whole process that we've talked about fit with that?
Glenn, if I could pass also the microphone to Adrian, because I believe you have to leave for a plane in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We can run.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you've also got the issue, a lot of this is sort of what I call metadata.
Yeah.
It's attached to your nominal shopping record, or it's attached to your credit card details. It's attached to your profile of those websites that you're subscribed to. And it obviously has value to many organisations, but I don't see quite how you, some of this data, how you own it yourself as yet. This is the whole point. Someone else has collected it on you, but yes, you have a right to perhaps see that data deleted, but do you have a human right to it?
I don't know. I'm asking you. You're the expert.
Yeah, who
I think
owns
you're allowed,
the metadata? The metadata is owned actually by the company that created that very data. Isn't that true?
That's what I would have thought. Yes, I mean, they own the intellectual property that runs the algorithm
Yeah,
that collects the data.
but that metadata is made up of your data, his data, and his data. So which bit do you take out?
Metadata
When I say I
is
don't
the
want
decision.
mine on there,
Yeah, it's actually not the data the user supplied. It's my decision
But then
based on my observations of my algorithms.
You are allowed to, I mean, my view is you're allowed to do it, because you're taking everybody, you know, they're fishermen, right? So that's kind of classification. You're anonymizing that, and then you're aggregating, so you know the behavior of fishermen or fisherwomen, okay? So now then you're saying you're applying that principle of fishermen or fisherwomen,
fisher persons,
to the people who log on, right, who meet that segment, right? So, you know, it's not about, I'm not targeting you as an individual, but now the bigger ethical question is, I'm aggregating data from 100 people, anonymized, aggregated, I'm benefiting from those 100 individuals, okay? But I suspect in a privacy notice, if you make that clear and transparent, then that's okay, because, you know, you've told them, I will anonymize your data, I will aggregate it to determine what how I better market products and services.
Good one. Glenn, if we come back to your question and you really wanted to have some examples of benefits that the GDPR could bring to EU. So if there is any remark to what was previously said, do it now, because I will rephrase it as a maybe some additional question. Adrian?
I think if data is sufficiently anonymized, it goes into that big sort of big data mountain that firms are used, can be fed into artificial intelligence, run algorithms against. So there's a lot of potential in that area if the data is sufficiently anonymized. We go back to the Fisher people and all these arguments again, but if the data is anonymized, it becomes extremely useful. And if it's open sourced big data, it becomes even more powerful.
Okay. Good one, good one. Now, if we come back to the benefits, I want to lay on the table just two examples where the regulation and standards actually did set some certain value that has become an advantage for the companies. FCA, the green label, and let's say ISO certification. Now, if the company has this FCA green label, if it complies to some certain rules regarding forestry, sustainable forestry, then they have actually advantages for some procurements, for some very green customers, etc. Now, Moritz was actually speaking from the point of aware customer that is demanding a certain hygiene in how his data is handled. Now, maybe there are much more customers like that. Maybe Europeans are, let's say, a little bit more picky than that. Now, in one of the presentations we had this morning, there was tons of numbers of how this is being perceived by various European and non-European countries. And Netherlands actually stuck out as one of the countries where I read in these graphs are living the demanding people that are actually demanding good care taken for their data. So maybe this, let's say, GDPR label would become as a selling advantage if two different services are being compared, like one being very careful with the customer's data and another one is just being pre-May 25 company. Or it's not the case because ISO is not a mandatory thing and FCA is also not mandatory yet. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have, in Germany, we have some experience with data protection certificates. One is at the Schleswig-Holstein Independent Center of Privacy Protection, which is the data protection authority. They run since, I think, 12 years, a certification scheme. We have Europrice, which is the European certification scheme. They have to reapply now, obviously, and there is some benefit. For instance, that's not very digital, but how do you call these companies who tear their paper apart? A shredder? Shredder companies. I mean, sounds a little bit funny, but in fact, in Germany, you cannot run this kind of business if you're not certified with the data protection seal for proper erasure of the data. So we see, in Germany, we see a development of a new segment, a market segment, in which companies offer these kind of certification schemes. And this is a fundamental part, by the way, of the GDPR. So it's
probably plenty of new businesses,
another area of new businesses.
Yeah. Now we're going to agree, which is very exciting. But that is one of the roles of trade associations, is to have codes of practice for their industry. And in our case, we have a compliance process that every member company must go through, which includes site visits and so on. And then it's known if that company uses our logo, our DMA logo, that they are a good player in the sector, and often that becomes a requirement in tenders within our sector for companies who are choosing agencies or data providers or technology solutions and so on. So I think there are those roles, and you could look at consumer-facing certification as you proposed. I think The assumption of GDPR, however, is to create a level of trust and confidence in the whole system, in the whole economy, and in every company. So if GDPR is successful, you would say consumers across Europe would be able to have confidence in every company that they're considering. But of course, that's not terribly realistic. There are always going to be bad players out there and people breaching the regulations. But the law itself is supposed to be that assurance, generally speaking.
What would be interesting as well is to ask how many people in the audience here checked the building certificate when you came in, just to make sure that the building didn't fall on you.
Oh, the locals know the story. It was long.
It was a long time ago?
It was, no, it was a long process. It was all the papers, because this building was actually very important for presidency events.
There you go.
It had to open all the time
but it's important that we don't, none of us think to check whether this building was built safely. We didn't check a certificate, we didn't look for a seal, we didn't look for any approval. We just assumed that this was a building that was built safely for the people that are inside it. And I think what Chris was, I think where we might be ending up, I hope where we're ending up, is that we no longer even need to look for a certificate on the company or a trust seal. There's going to be a big market. We know there's going to be a feeding frenzy in this sort of this trust seal thing. But it would be very interesting to just walk. I felt very comfortable walking into this building today knowing that it wasn't going to fall down on my head. And there are some companies out there that I implicitly trust with my data, perhaps wrongly at the moment, but I do trust them. And I think what GDPR is perhaps going to do is give me that sense of trust that I don't even need to look for a trust seal. I don't even need, why are we asking people to consent to their use of data? Did you guys consent to walking in a building that might fall on your head? No. You just trusted the building, and that's where I think we should be heading towards. And the idea that we no longer have to tick a box, it just is implicit. That company will use my data as I expect it to do. We're a long way off that yet, but I suspect, I hope that's what GDPR is going to drive us towards, and maybe away from those seals.
It's an interesting point. I think, one thing we didn't talk about today, actually, there's three parties in this, right? I mean, we talked about, of course, the firms. We didn't talk enough about, we talked about data subjects, but indirectly, but this regulation is, the impact and the education of the citizen, right, is a big one. Because it's actually telling, waking people up saying, be careful, privacy is important, your data, where it is, right? And forcing companies to do that. It's going to be quite interesting to see to what extent people pay attention to that. I mean, everybody's heard now of GDPR, the tennis coach is emailing about GDPR. Everyone has heard about GDPR now. It'll be quite interesting. But I think the only way to achieve, what Duncan's saying there is I think if it becomes a hard regulation, and then basically, you can't be in business, right? So you can't open a building, right, unless you comply with these regs, right? At the moment, you can open a company without complying, so to speak. You'll be fined, of course. But if the law gets tougher, saying, look, you can't do this now, and a little bit more prescription from a GDPR perspective, then would mean I don't care anymore, right? I'm protected as an individual.
Okay, good. Alexander?
About the competitiveness and some benefits from data protection and GDPR for small companies, also human factor, IT development, all this stuff developing very fast, and you can't manage these risks very firmly and strong enough. But the GDPR is a tool that gives us some kind of discipline level for our employees, our staff, and under GDPR, if you are like a controller, each controller has its management and employees, but also management is data subjects. And if you think as a data subject, do you want that your data as a data subject's data managed like this? If it's okay, then keep processing. If it's not okay, just change your own procedures at your entity. That's attitude, and if it makes sense, then okay. If you have purpose for processing, then process it, and just give a little bit knowledge to the employees who process the data every day. I think it's not enough, but still, you will be more compliant than our competitors who doesn't have such learning systems and procedures.
So the advantage here is that European companies will just simply force to build better products and better services in terms of that, with some security by design already implemented, with more education to its employees, with more culture things. Now, I might drop a bomb here now, but if it was built with this component in mind, that there will be some competitive advantages for European companies, and so we're now seeing a flock of emails coming from non-European companies, and we know if we talk about US services and US companies, they have better PR, they are much more agile, and are we not just facing a situation that these companies, including Facebook's, et cetera, will make themselves, will make their services GDPR fully compliant in zilch time, while European companies will adapt more slowly, will look through the fingers at some things, et cetera. So we in that case, obviously, we would contribute to building better services for our children. They will be more compliant, they will be more safe, but will it not just dismantle last hope of some IT domination, or at least ambition for that?
I guess I'll answer that in two different ways. One, I think a company like Facebook will well be able to be compliant with the letter of the law and have a battery of lawyers defend its positions if they have cases brought against them. But they may not yet, in doing so, be compliant with the spirit of the law and the desire to really put customers at the center of it. I think it comes down to something I heard on many speaking platforms for many years from people from the technology businesses in Silicon Valley who created the expression that you are the product, that if you're not paying for a service, you become the product. And I don't think people want to be the product. You know, they don't want to be the product where Mark Zuckerberg makes billions of pounds because of what he knows about you.
They like to be commodity if it's a win-win situation, the airline points you mentioned.
Yeah,
it happens.
So in the sense of a first-party relationship with a business that has a clear physical product or service, the data is being used to enhance the relationship with that company. So in that sense, if it's an airline or it's a retailer, the goods they're selling, the flights they're selling, the experience on the airplane is what they're selling. They're not turning you into the customer, they're trying to create a better service for you. So I think that notion that you are the product is fundamentally flawed potentially and something we're getting at. Then the other thing I just wanted to say is because I originally grew up in America, I've always liked to follow my American sports results every morning, and I check two online publications, USA Today and the New York Daily News, so I can read about the New York sports teams. Neither one is now available to me in Europe because of GDPR, so the Daily News is part of a group of newspapers that have all decided not to have their product available in Europe, and USA Today now has an EU compliant version that doesn't contain any sports results or any ability to search.
So that's a good thing for Europe then?
Yeah, no, he makes
I have to follow football now.
Yeah, because we are treated as a market, and if the overheads are too big, especially for almost free information, etc., then obviously it was a decision.
But isn't it an interesting situation that a US company, or US media company, for what reason ever, decides rather to leave customers in Europe because they are unsure whether they are compliant with the GDPR rules? And I don't think that US today has a problem with documentation. They seem to have another problem, maybe even deeper within the system. If you look at one of the most important papers, tabloid papers in Germany, Bild, if you go to Bild Online, you have 128 trackers on the side. I don't know what they do with the data, you know? Nobody knows. Probably they don't even know. But these companies, they will have to rethink their processes. And they have to, I mean, it takes a long time until you load the paper anyway, you know? So maybe it makes sense to just get rid of some of these trackers. But so sometimes I think if they leave the European market, not German market, if they leave the European market, we should think, why do they do this? And by the way, I mean, maybe you know it better than I do, but sometimes I'm not sure whether it's true to say that customers in the United States do not have the same feelings about how companies deal with their data, or in China, or in Australia, than we perceive it, or maybe sometimes companies want us to perceive it. I know that, for instance, Google Meet was a service measuring your energy consumption in your own home. They quitted it because they weren't able to roll it out in Northern America. And Kevorkian was just quoted. She was the one who developed Privacy by Design that was for smart metering. So she thought of how to put trust in smart metering because there is a value for the society in using smart meters. So maybe we should start, and COPPA, you know COPPA probably, which is the Children Online Privacy Act. If you look into this, the US is far better off in this respect in protecting minors in the data protection area than Europe was the last 20 years, you know? So I think that maybe there is also something good in rethinking the strategy for companies, thinking of why is US today not offering their service anymore in Europe?
You know, but it could very well be. I mean, you know, there's so few. It's such a small market for them percentage-wise, and it's just simply not worth the hassle, the effort to go through compliance, right? I mean, that's kind of a particular angle. But I think what we haven't debated enough is, you know, the attitude. You know, and again, there's two. Nobody's ever right or wrong, but you could see the other side saying, "What do you got to hide? What's the problem here, right? You know, who's been damaged here by data? Who's been, you know, been tracked? And what did they do to you? Did you sell you ice cream on the street? Financial fine, you know, financial, you know, data, you know. So the American system is based on that, right? Saying financial loss, health data. So they've got protection around that. So what's your problem? You know, we say religious, sexual orientation, etc. Well, you know, we've got laws to prevent firms from being biased. We monitor firms for equal pay, right? So what are you really worried about here? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you could see the argument, right? You could see that argument being made.
Okay, good one. Glenn? Could you please... oh, yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
no, I've got it. It's several times people keep saying about the value of data. And today, a couple of times, people actually mentioned that, you know, they actually sort of said, it's got value. Well, what value is it? So, I mean, can I, you know, when I say you can have my data, how much are they going to give me for my data? €0.50?
I think
€1?
Yeah, I think what you have to think about is there are some that's very benign data that can have a massive impact on sales and marketing, for example. So we know that anniversary marketing, birthday marketing, people treat themselves on their birthday. So all I need from you is your date of birth, and I can send you an email on your date of birth saying, happy birthday, treat yourself. And I can reward you with a 20% off. And we can see statistically, we can show demonstrably that as a company, I can make a lot of money by simply knowing that one small piece of data. And so what we have to work out is, I got something from that. Was my data misused? No. However, the large-scale systematic monitoring of people, which is what the law talks about, is clearly, there's no quid pro quo. There's no balance in that. And we're missing some of the balance in this. I am quite happy to tell British Airways when my birthday is if they're going to upgrade me. That's not a piece of data that I have a problem with.
But it's a business model just to get everybody's birthdays. Yeah, I mean, to get name, date, birthday, and then sell that to someone else. I mean, that's a business model.
Now that's interesting. That sort of so that onward sale, I think, and again, we were just talking about whether that was the business model of the organisation, as Chris was saying. If British Airways, for example, keeps that data to themselves, that has gained my trust, enough trust for me to give them my birth date because they reward me of that birth date. It's the leakage of that data outside of that company, the resale of that data, which those are the bad players in the marketplace at the moment, this whole-scale resale of data. And certainly in the ad tech world, with those 280 or 300 cookies that USA Today are dropping on me, there's a huge amount of value in that as well. But I have no control over that data. And I think that's where we haven't got, this is the privacy regulation, we haven't got here yet. And it's working out a very, very delicate balance in terms of allowing me to use my personal data for my benefit with organizations and to have it used as the fuel for a digital economy. And that's a tricky balance.
But notice, interestingly, that when all those emails came around to me in the last 3, 4, 5 days, not one of them asked me for my date of birth. No, one did. Sorry, one. And I just smiled at that. But all the others were just saying, we will just keep your name, email, and that's it. But that's not true.
No, I think it just demonstrates a lack of care, a lack of knowledge, a lack of awareness as to what GDPR is actually trying to do. Yeah. When you work on these GDPR transition programs, if you're in a bank, it's the last 5 years we've been working on this stuff, and we've been working really hard to work out the data flows and all the rest of it. Those emails that everybody's seeing are a knee-jerk response to organizations that have gone, oh, we got to get this thing out by the 25th, otherwise we're doomed.
It happened. And while you are answering this question and adding, I would really like to dismiss the panel since we are at our time end. And gentlemen, I would like you to think about a simple answer. If there is an absolutely new company who haven't done anything and they will only have next week, what is the single most important thing you would recommend them to do in terms of GDPR in the next week as a first thing? Thank you very much. Now your comment. No, you. Yeah.
Just one thing. Wow, my gosh.
No, I thought you were going to comment on the previous one.
No, I was going to comment on just one small comment on the value of data. I guess we mustn't forget, Facebook is free, so Google is free, right? So I guess you're getting something in return already, and by implication, I guess they're going to make some money somehow, right? So I guess that's kind of the value thing. What can a firm do? I suppose what I would do is I'd guide a firm, first of all, highest risk to risks and freedom, to the rights and freedoms, always rights and freedoms. What are we doing that could compromise the rights and freedoms? So if you're dealing with sensitive data, you've got stuff to do. So really focusing immediately on the special categories of data. And within that, do we have suppliers or not? And if it's within your organization, you're sort of okay. So you've got suppliers, you've got, that then says, right, follow the chain quickly. Make sure that's secure. So that's the one thing I'd advise firms to do.
Good one. I wanted short and it was a superb answer. Straight thing to do. And it's doable. Okay, Alexander?
First thing for a new company, I would look at the industry. It's my main business I'm going to do. And if this business is connected to data and it's going to be my money, then I'm going to pay attention to the GDPR, fundamentally. If not, then just no rush, some knowledge, and keep proceeding with your new company, keep establishing and keep doing business.
This is the best GDPR consultant I've heard today. No rush, don't worry, we'll be fine. Superb guy. Okay.
I would just say, as an educator, educate people, teach. Okay, so if you want to reduce the number of accidents...
What exactly?
Okay, so if you want a week. All right. So if you want to reduce the number of accidents in a company, you teach people to look for health and safety problems. If you want to stop hurting people with regard to data, teach the staff how to spot that risk. So don't rely on a DPO, don't rely on a lawyer, rely upon the people that work in your industry to go, oh, we shouldn't be doing that with data. You have to teach people how to do that. And I think that's the one thing I would do is say, go get yourself educated, learn about GDPR, don't read the newspapers, learn.
Okay, what's written in that one single document almost nobody has read from the company's point of view? Please.
Yeah, just pick up on Alexander's point that what you would really need to do is a simple privacy impact assessment and determine what your risks are. But I do hope if you're starting a new business from scratch, you also will have many other things that you will be worried about in taking your product to market. But I think under GDPR, it's important to understand how your new offer interrelates with people's right to privacy, and a simple privacy impact assessment can help you do that.
Assessment, good one. Okay, thank you.
Do everything what all these guys just said. Take your 4 o'clock tea, keep calm, and carry on.
Tea. Okay.
Okay, I finish with just spend a couple of hours and identify exactly what data you need and why.
Okay, good one. What is the minimum viable liable data in order to keep my business running from this day on? Thank you very much, gentlemen. A nice applause for this fantastic panel we had today. I mean, superb knowledge here. Thank you.
Thank you for staying, people.
Okay, good, good. Thank you. Thanks. Glenn, very much.